Okay, get ready for this one. Because today we're diving into a document that claims to be a first-hand account from a time traveler in ancient Jerusalem.
Yeah, time traveler.
It's not just like, some vague story, though.
Right.
It reads like a seriously detailed journal,
Wow.
packed with observations about daily life back then, descriptions of all those key figures, and even some technical notes.
That's interesting. Technical notes.
I know, right?
So what era are we talking about?
Well, this document focuses specifically on the final days of a pretty famous historical figure. I think you'll recognize the name.
Okay.
Jesus of Nazareth.
Okay, now that is fascinating.
I know, right? And it gets even more interesting because the account offers all these details and perspectives that you just won't find in any of the traditional historical sources.
So we're talking potential new insights here. This isn't just a rehashing of the old story.
Exactly. I mean, think about it for a second. What would it even be like to be transported back to 30 AD? What would be, like, the most striking things to see?
Right. I mean, talk about a culture shock.
I know. So that's what we'll be exploring in this deep dive.
Awesome.
Those differences in perspective, whether this document's even credible at all, and how it all connects to what we already know.
Sounds like a plan. Let's dive in.
All right, so let's unpack this time traveler's story a little.
Okay.
He's introduced to us as a retired USAF pilot.
A pilot, huh?
Yep. And he was mysteriously approached during a trip to Villa Hermosa, Mexico.
Villa Hermosa. Okay, this is already intriguing.
Yeah, and then it gets even better.
Oh.
He hints at being part of this much larger, highly classified operation called Operation Swivel, or sometimes he calls it Operation Caballo de Troya.
Those names definitely sound like something out of a spy thriller.
I know.
Okay, so we've got time travel, we've got secret operations. What else?
Oh, he's also super reluctant to reveal very much about the whole operation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Classified and all.
But it's clear that he's deeply fascinated by the life and death of Jesus.
Okay, but why? What makes him so interested?
Yeah, he doesn't really say. But get this, he also claims to have experienced, surveillance.
Surveillance, like he's being watched.
Yeah, and even interference from various intelligence agencies while he was doing his research.
Wait, hold on. So we've got time travel, secret ops, and now spies.
Yep.
This is getting good.
I know. It just raises so many questions about, what forces might be at play here.
Right.
Both in the past and, even in the present.
Okay, so how does this time travel even work?
Right.
Like, what's the mechanism?
Right. Good question. So he mentioned something about manipulating, and this is a weird word, swivels.
Swivels. Like the things that chairs spin on.
Yeah, but apparently these are subatomic particles that can, get this, influence time.
Okay, we're definitely into science fiction territory now.
I know.
And I'm guessing he doesn't just hop in a DeLorean, right?
No, definitely not. He talks about using this specially designed module that he calls a cuna for the actual trip.
A cuna.
Yeah, like a cradle, I guess. But it's not just a simple time machine,
What do you mean?
He describes it as like a sophisticated lab equipped with all this advanced tech that let him analyze, events and stuff beyond just what he was seeing.
So he wasn't just passively observing?
No, definitely not. He even had get this, a microcomputer disguised as a walking stick.
Wait, a computer in a walking stick? Seriously?
Seriously.
So this isn't just time travel. It's like time travel meets James Bond.
I know, right? It adds a whole new layer to how we interpret his observations, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He wasn't just watching. He was actively investigating and documenting everything.
Exactly. Okay, so he describes working with Israel.
Israel.
Yeah, to place this cuna near Jerusalem.
Okay.
Well, very hush-hush, of course.
Makes sense.
And what's his mission once he's there? Well, it's pretty straightforward. Observe and analyze, but with a major focus on Jesus.
So it sounds like he starts out as this detached scientific observer.
Yeah, but that detachment doesn't seem to last for very long.
Really? Why is that?
Well, you'll see.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Because his account is full of these incredibly vivid descriptions of Jerusalem, Bethany, and the whole surrounding area.
I can imagine. To be transported back to that time and place.
I know. He even mentions noticing a specific detail about the coins.
Coins? What kind of coins?
The ones they placed on Jesus' eyes during the burial.
Oh, right.
He says the inscription on them was misspelled.
Misspelled? How would he even know that?
Well, that's where his module with all the fancy tech comes in. But, it makes you think, what other little details might we have overlooked in the, the traditional accounts?
Right. Like, what else is hidden in plain sight?
Exactly. And it's not just the setting.
What else?
He doesn't just observe the setting. He encounters these, key figures, too.
Like who?
Like, Lazarus, Mary and Martha, a bunch of the disciples. He even witnesses some of Jesus's teachings and miracles firsthand.
Wow, talk about a front row seat to history.
Ah.
But if this is all happening in 30 AD, how is he documenting it? I mean, no cameras back then, right?
Right, that's where it gets really interesting. He's using that hidden microcomputer in his walking stick to record everything he's seeing and hearing.
So, like I said, James Bond meets time travel.
Exactly.
This is amazing.
I know. But here's where things get even more fascinating.
Okay, I'm ready.
The document starts offering these perspectives that are different from, like, the traditional biblical accounts.
Like what?
Well, for example, his take on Judas's betrayal.
Okay, that's always been a bit of a mystery.
Right. So instead of it just being about greed,
Right.
he suggests that maybe Judas resented John the Baptist's influence on Jesus.
That's a motive you don't find in the Gospels.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, could that be a more accurate portrayal of Judas's motives?
It definitely makes you question the accepted narrative.
For sure. And it's not the only divergence.
What else is different?
Well, the cleansing of the temple incident, for example.
You mean where Jesus, flips over the tables and drives out the money changers?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That one, it's often depicted as this, righteous outburst.
Right.
But here, in this document, it's presented as a much more calculated act by Jesus.
Interesting.
And it goes on like that. Even events like the raising of Lazarus and the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, they're interpreted differently.
Okay, so we're dealing with time travel, a secret operation, new perspectives on familiar stories. What else?
Oh, there's more.
Bring it on. I'm hooked.
Because then there are these incidents that, deepen the intrigue even further.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, there's this whole thing about the man with the pitcher.
The man with the pitcher.
Yeah, the one who leads the disciples to the room where they have the Last Supper.
Oh, right. It always seemed kind of random in the Gospels, just a detail.
Yeah, well, in this document, the time traveler suggests that maybe there was some prearrangement involved.
Prearrangement.
Yeah, like it was planned.
That makes you think, was there, a hidden network of people working behind the scenes?
Right, orchestrating events.
Wow, the plot thickens.
Totally. And there's also this whole thing with John Mark and his family.
John Mark?
Yeah, the one who writes the Gospel of Mark.
Oh, right.
Well, he was a young guy back then, and apparently his family helped facilitate the Last Supper itself.
Okay, so how does that tie into the mystery?
Well, the time traveler seems to suspect that they played a much more significant role than we realize.
Interesting. It's like he's piecing together this puzzle, but with missing pieces.
Exactly. And what really struck me is that the time traveler's own emotional connection to Jesus seems to grow throughout the experience.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he starts out detached, all scientific and observer-like, but witnessing the raising of Lazarus seems to have a deep impact on him.
Yeah, that would definitely shake things up a bit.
Right. And by the time we get to the trial, his empathy for Jesus is really palpable.
I can imagine.
And it undoubtedly colors his observations of everything that happens.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. What else did he see in those final days leading up to the crucifixion?
Oh, there's so much more to unpack here.
Well, let's get to it. I can't wait to hear what else this time traveler has to say.
Okay, we'll dive into that right after the break.
So let's talk about how this guy actually experiences, daily life in Jerusalem.
Okay.
Remember, he's pretending to be a Greek merchant.
Right.
So he's using period-appropriate clothing and everything.
Wow.
He even carries around a pouch of gold to, blend in.
That's commitment.
It is. And all the while, he's using that incredible hidden tech, that microcomputer in his walking stick.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
To record everything he's seeing and hearing.
Like a first-century spy mission?
Exactly. And, get this, he's not alone.
He's not.
Nope. He mentioned sending audio transmissions back to his companion.
Wait, what? Like a partner in time crime?
Something like that. Her name is Eliseo, and she's monitoring everything from the Cuna.
But that's hidden on the Mount of Olives.
Right. So they're constantly in communication.
Wow. This is wild. So what are some of the things that stand out to him about Jerusalem?
Well, he paints a pretty vivid picture of the city.
Okay.
The markets, all bustling and crowded.
I bet.
The architecture, like the temple and Herod's palace, very imposing.
You can almost picture it, can't you?
You can.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just focus on the city itself.
What else?
He talks about the surrounding landscape, too.
Yeah.
All the olive groves and dusty roads.
He even mentions this one encounter in Bethany.
Oh, yeah.
Where he surprises this woman carrying a water jar in a garden.
Seems like a small detail.
It does, but I think it shows how much he understands the social dynamics of the time.
How so?
Well, he knows a man wouldn't normally talk to a woman like that.
Right, especially a stranger.
Exactly.
So he's really aware of those cultural differences.
Yeah, and it helps him, navigate everything.
That's fascinating.
I know. It's those little details that really bring the past to life,
Absolutely.
It's not just about the big events.
No.
It's about understanding how people actually lived back then.
Their everyday reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And speaking of everyday reality, one of the most fascinating parts of this document is his account of a dinner.
A dinner?
Yeah, at Lazarus's house.
Lazarus. Like the guy Jesus raised from the dead?
The one and only.
Wow.
This dinner takes place shortly after Lazarus comes back to life.
Oh, wow. Imagine being at that party.
Right. To know this guy was dead just a few days ago.
It must have been surreal.
Totally. And the time traveler doesn't just, describe the atmosphere.
What does he do?
He actually listens to Lazarus' account of his death and resurrection.
Really?
Yeah. And he notes how it lines up with traditional Jewish beliefs about the afterlife.
Interesting.
And gives us some insight into how people back then understood those concepts.
So he's really going beyond just observing.
He is. He's actively engaging with the people and ideas of that time.
That's really cool.
And his attention to detail is incredible.
Like what?
Well, he describes watching Jesus, Mary, and Martha interacting.
Okay.
And he points out their different personalities. Mary's more quiet and contemplative.
Right.
While Martha's, more practical and bustling around.
I can see that.
And he's present at another dinner, too.
Another one.
Yeah, this time at Simon's house.
Okay.
Where he sees Mary anointing Jesus' feet with that super expensive perfume.
Oh, yeah. That's in all 4 Gospels.
It is. But the time traveler's account adds some interesting details.
Like what?
Well, he describes the scent of the perfume in detail.
Oh, wow.
And he even says it was later analyzed by the tech in the Cuna.
What was it?
Spikenard.
Spikenard.
Yeah, it's this really expensive oil derived from a plant that grows in the Himalayas.
Wow, so it would have been a rare luxury in Jerusalem.
Exactly, which makes Mary's gesture even more significant.
It does. And of course, Judas criticizes her for wasting the perfume, right?
Right. But here's where the time traveler's interpretation gets interesting.
How so?
He thinks Judas might not have just been worried about the poor.
Okay.
He suggests maybe there was some deeper resentment, maybe even jealousy.
So more to Judas's motivations than we usually think.
Exactly. And it's like that detail about the misspelled coin.
Right.
Even in these big, important moments, the little things can reveal a lot.
I like that, the little things.
And this ability to see those nuances, it comes up again during Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem.
You mean when he rides in on a donkey and the crowds are cheering?
That's the one.
Huh.
But the time traveler describes it a bit differently.
Oh, how so?
He says the crowds weren't shouting, "Hosanna."
They weren't, but that's what the Gospels say.
I know, but the time traveler heard them shouting different phrases.
Like what?
Things like, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the divine."
Okay.
And "Blessed be the kingdom that comes from heaven."
So are you saying the Gospels might have gotten some details wrong?
Not necessarily wrong, but maybe, shaped by later interpretations.
Or maybe even some theological agendas.
Possibly. The time traveler's perspective seems more raw, more unfiltered.
It really makes you rethink everything.
And that's the point of a deep dive like this, right?
Sure.
It forces us to look beyond those familiar narratives.
And consider other perspectives.
Exactly. And the deeper we go into this document, the more our assumptions are challenged.
This time traveler's perspective is definitely challenging mine.
Well, there's still more to uncover.
Okay, what else does he have to say about the events leading up to the Last Supper? This is really making me, question everything I thought I knew about this whole period.
I know, right? It's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It is. So are there any other incidents he describes that, aren't found in those traditional accounts?
Oh, yeah, there are several. And some are pretty disturbing.
Okay, like what?
Well, he describes witnessing this ritual in Jerusalem where a woman accused of adultery is forced to drink this poisonous concoction.
What?
Seriously.
Yeah, it's not mentioned anywhere in the Bible.
That's crazy. I mean, it's a good reminder that, history isn't always as sanitized as we might like to think.
No. So what else does he observe about the political climate back then?
Well, he spends a lot of time detailing the political maneuvering within the Sanhedrin.
The Sanhedrin.
Yeah, the Jewish ruling council.
Right.
He talks about a meeting where they discussed how to get rid of Jesus.
Because they saw him as a threat.
Exactly. They were afraid of his growing influence and, the way he challenged their authority.
So it wasn't just a religious thing.
No, definitely not. It was political, too.
Makes sense. And this fear, this is what ultimately led to them arresting him, right?
Right. But there might have been more to it than just eliminating a threat.
What do you mean?
Well, he gives us some details about the Last Supper.
Okay.
Specifically, how the location was chosen.
Oh, right. That always seemed kind of random in the Gospels.
Yeah, well, the time traveler suggests that John Mark might have been involved in setting it up.
John Mark, the Gospel writer.
Yeah, he was just a young guy back then.
Right.
But maybe he helped prearrange the meeting place, possibly on Jesus' instructions.
So it's like Jesus knew what was coming.
It seems that way. And get this, the time traveler thinks Judas didn't know where the Last Supper was until the last minute.
Why would they keep it from him?
Maybe to delay his betrayal. I mean, it's all speculation. But
It's fascinating, though.
it is, right, like a carefully choreographed play.
Exactly. Okay, so what about the arrest and trial? What stands out to you from those sections?
His account of the physical abuse is really hard to read.
Yeah, it's tough.
He describes the interrogation methods, the beatings, the mocking from the guards.
It's brutal.
It is, but it also makes Jesus seem more human.
More relatable.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just some distant figure in a story.
And it wasn't all physical, right?
Right. He observes some psychological tactics, too.
Like what?
Well, during the trial, the high priest, Caiaphas, kept bringing up John the Baptist.
To provoke Jesus.
Exactly. He knew it was a sensitive subject.
It sounds like they were just trying to break him, any way they could.
Yeah, it's no wonder the time traveler felt like he had to do something.
Right. He even tried to help Jesus carry the cross.
He did. He offered a Roman guard his helmet.
Wow. That's risky.
It is. He went from detached observer to, full-on empathy.
Yeah, risking his own safety to show compassion.
It really says a lot about the impact Jesus had on him.
Okay, so the crucifixion itself, what does he say about that?
He goes into a lot of detail, really emphasizes the physical agony.
Like the nails and the position on the cross?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he even uses the tech in his module to analyze that darkness that happened.
Right.
He concludes it wasn't supernatural.
It wasn't.
Nope. He thinks it was a haboob.
A haboob.
Yeah, a massive dust storm.
Wow. So even in this, incredibly emotional moment, he's still looking for rational explanations.
It's who he is, a scientist at heart. But, it doesn't diminish the power of the event itself.
No, not at all. What about the aftermath? What happens after the crucifixion?
His account is just as detailed. He describes the whole burial process.
Okay.
Notes that Jesus was wrapped in a linen shroud.
Which he later examines, right?
He does. And here's the interesting thing.
What's that?
He says that type of shroud wasn't common until centuries later.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, so it might be an anachronism.
Whoa, that's a pretty big deal.
It is, right.
Uh-huh.
And he also describes the coins on Jesus' eyes, again mentioning the misspelling.
Oh, right.
And he sees them posting Roman and Jewish guards at the tomb.
To make sure nobody steals the body.
That's the idea, but it also shows the tension between those groups.
Right. Okay, so what about his final encounter with Judas?
Yes. It's a pretty emotional scene, full of regret and despair.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Judas tries to give back the money he got for betraying Jesus.
But the priests won't take it.
Nope. And then the time traveler sees Judas commit suicide.
That's heavy stuff.
It is. And it happens in a different place than the Bible says.
So like I said, this whole document is full of these little details that just make you rethink everything.
I know. It's a wild ride, isn't it? Whether you believe it or not, it definitely gives you a different perspective on the story.
It does. It makes you realize there might be more to the story than we thought,
For sure. And that's what makes this kind of deep dive so exciting.
Absolutely. It's all about challenging those assumptions and, being open to new possibilities.
Exactly. And who knows what other mysteries are still out there just waiting to be uncovered.
Well, that's the beauty of it, isn't it? There's always more to learn. And that's it for our deep dive today, folks. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep exploring and keep those minds open.